All right, what's up, y'all? Welcome to another episode of Learning How to Program with me, your boy Aric. And today we're going to go over the second part of object-oriented programming, pretty much understanding inheritance and subclasses. And if you have not actually subscribed to this guy's YouTube channel and you're trying to learn Python programming, Build with Python is an excellent teacher. There's a few excellent teachers out there, and he's one of them. So without further ado, let's get started.
About inheritance and polymorphism, and we are only going to be covering polymorphism if we have enough time. If we don't have enough time, we'll cover that in the next video. But let's recap what we did in the last video. Was that we created a class of students. We learned about classes and objects basically, and we created a class of students with the attribute of number of students inside a class. Then we created or initialized the instance variables inside this initialization function, which is also known as a special function. And then we have this function inside our students class that prints out the full name of the student. And then we added two students or objects or instances to our class, that is me and Johnny Sins, the famous Johnny Sins. And then we just printed out the full name and the number of students inside a class. So let's get started with inheritance. So what exactly does inheritance mean in terms of biology? So forget about coding.
All right, so let me just say this. Last video is completely awesome. If you haven't seen last video, you should go back and watch it, because like he said, pretty much we just went through understanding objects and like classes, you know, like instances, and pretty much the student 1, the student 2, these two rows is pretty much like objects of the student class, because like we pass them through. Then this is like we use like pretty much to initialize those variables, and then we created a function. And a function, what that does, it just like performs a particular action. It's like sums of code, so you got to keep writing blocks of code. So we use assumption. Function, and what that function did was pretty much took the first name and last name and added it together. All right, so let's keep going.
For our scenario, let's say you have a dad or your mom, which you probably have, otherwise you wouldn't have been born. But anyways, let's take the example of your parents, and you are probably the son or the daughter that is listening to this video. So you got some characteristics from your parents. For example, let's say your parents had a blue eye color. Then you probably got it from your parents. If you also have a blue eye color, then you probably inherited it, or you got this characteristic from your parent. Similarly, other characteristics like height or some kind of behavior. For example, if your mom is an extrovert or an introvert, you got these characteristics from your mom or your dad. So for example, in my case, I'm an entrepreneur and I really like creating my own things. And I got this from my mom, who owns a hospital and runs her hospital. So I inherited this characteristics from her, this one characteristic from her. So, and I'm also kind of an introvert, so I also inherited that. But for example, let's say you are bald and your dad is also bald. So you kind of, had bad luck and you inherited this baldness from your dad. But for example, let's say your parents are really, really wealthy. So you inherited a lot of money in that case, and good for you. But anyway, so this is known as inheritance in terms of biology. But now let's understand what inheritance means in terms of coding and Python, or basically object-oriented programming. So in our case, if we inherit or if we get some characteristics from another class to create a subclass, then that is known as inheritance. For example, let's say we have a class of students which has a lot of attributes of class students inside it. For example, number of students and these 3 instance variables. Then it has this function of full name inside the students class. So all these things are attributes of the students class. What if we could just take all these characteristics that are inside the students class and use it inside another class? This is basically known as inheritance. It will get much more clear when I give you an example. So for example, let's say we are inside our high school and we have a class which has a lot of students inside the class. Now every school also has a lot of teachers, and every teacher also has a first name, last name and email. So we don't want to write all of this code again. We simply want to inherit all of this code inside our teacher's class. So what we are going to do is we are going to create a new class, and let's just call it teachers. And we are going to inherit all of this stuff inside our teachers class. And how do we do that? We're just going to write students inside the brackets of our teacher's class, and this will simply inherit all of this cool stuff, kind of copy and paste this all of this stuff inside a teacher's class. So we can just write pass over here for now. So pass basically means we don't want to write anything right now over inside this class of teachers. And let me just format this properly. So now we have created this class of teachers, and we have inherited all of this first name, the last name, and this email inside a teacher's class. Don't believe me? So what we are going to do is we are just going to replace the students with teachers. So let's do that with both of them. So instead of students, me and Johnny have now become teachers. We have gotten a promotion of some kind. And now if we run this main file, as you can see, it's still printing out. Even though we have used this teachers class to create these students, still it's working. So instead of student 1, we can just write teacher 1, teacher 2, and teacher dot full name. I'm just giving you an example. That's why I'm kind of just replacing students with teachers. So we got all of these characteristics, for example, the first name, the last name, and the email inside this teachers class without even initializing the instance variables. And we can even print out, which I'll show you the full name of the teacher without even writing the function, because we have already written it inside our students class. Now, if we had to make this teachers class from scratch, we would have to copy and paste all of this stuff inside also a teachers class, and then it would kind of make the whole point moot, because we are trying to make sure that the code that we are writing is reusable. So now we can just...
All right. In my little episodes here, I got what you call a dab for understanding. So we're gonna dab on them one time because we understand a little bit more. All right, so start off with the first thing I pretty much understand. I understood the verbiage he actually used when it comes to subclasses, right? All right, so picking my little mouse here, we got this first class, which is students. And then inside of a class, what we have to do is we have to put pretty much objects and variables. And then this little piece of code right here, this is a special function where we initialize those variables. Okay. And then we pretty much did another function here that print a first name and last name. And if we were to do another class, we would have to copy and paste all of this. But because this is a subclass, and we wanted to inherit it from the last class, we're going to put, class, the name of that class, and then we're going to end up, the parentheses there, we're going to pass it through as an object or something. We're going to put the name of the other class. So because we did that, it's now going to inherit everything from this class. So we don't have to print it out again. We don't have to actually copy and paste. We don't have to initialize those variables again. So now we can come down and we can pretty much write stu1.full name, and it's going to print out all of the class variables, instance variables of the students class. And real quick, so you can understand that too, let me go over this. So inside of all this, we actually have a class. This is a class called students class. Okay. And then inside of this, all of this is pretty much attributes of the students class. Now we look in particular, we got instance variables, which is these three instance variables, because we understand what a variable is when it comes to Python programming, right? You set, it's like you say 5 is equal to X, right? We understand that whenever we want to use X again, then that pretty much means it's 5, the number 5. So that's a variable. So now these are instance variables because these variables are inside of a class. Right. So once these variables inside of a class, those 3 instance variables. Now we take those 3 and kind of sum it up together. Then that's what you get, an object. Student 1, student 2, or stu1, stu2 are objects. So it's like you break it down. As a whole, it's a class. And then you look inside of that class, I can open up the jar, is objects. And then you take the objects and break it down. Those are instant variables. And again, I do have my notes. I kind of want to write it down as I'm going. You should do the same. All right, so without further ado, let's keep going.
Just change the if we want to add something over here in the initialization function, we can do that. If we want to add some other class variables over here, we can add them, and they will automatically get added to this teacher's class. Now you might not see the value of it right now, but when you are creating like really big projects, then this comes in really handy. Or if you're working in a professional environment, you can't do really without classes and objects and this process of inheritance. Now what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna change this to students again, and I'm just gonna change this also to students, because let's be honest here, I'm just a student and also a pretty good teacher. But we are going to create a new teacher over here.
And note what he just said, which is very important. He just said, like, in the future, as an experienced programmer, where you're writing all these good programs and algorithms and all that good stuff, and you're making money, he said that you cannot do without this, because you're going to be writing like hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of lines of code over a period of time. Whenever you want to refer back to that chunk of code, you're not going to write it all over again. So you got to learn how this thing works, how you write another class that can inherit things from another class, which would make it a subclass. So it's very important. Very good. Keep going.
So what we are going to do is we are going to write, maybe we are going to create a maths teacher, and we're going to call this teacher's class. And inside this teacher's class, we are going to give the name Emma. Make it capital, and then the last name, you guessed it right, it's Stone. pretty nice teacher, huh? Emma Stone @gmail.com. This is our email ID. And anyway, so we have created a maths teacher now, and if we want to print out the full name, let's say, of our maths teacher, let's actually print out the first name first. So let's just write maths dot first name, and we'll print it out. So let's try print, and let's just print it out. And we're also going to print out the full name. That is, we are going to call this function, and this function is going to be inherited inside our teacher's class. So we can just write maths dot full name, not f name, full name, and the full name is going to be automatically printed. So what we can do is we can just run this main file again, run main. And as you're able to see that the first name is being printed, and the second name, the full name, is also being printed, even though we use this teacher's class over here. Now the student teacher thing might be a little bit confusing.
All right, so let me pause it and let's, get some kind of bring it back, so make sure I understand these things, right? So what he did right here with this maths line of code on like line 22, he created another object, right? And then he passed through three more instant variables through there. Well, yeah, three more instant variables, because it pretty much equal out like that. It got name, last name, and email. And then what he did, he printed it out. And how he printed it out, he didn't actually print he didn't print maths. What he did is he actually he called back the full name function. Okay, so right here, when he said right here it says full name function, that's how you call back a function. Like, say for example, let me pull this up. All right, if I'm doing this right here, and I want, like, if I'm like writing code and I want to call back a function called full name, I'm writing code, I'm gonna be like full name blah, and then I keep going, and it's gonna call back that code. So, however, because that function is inside of a class, you have to actually reference that class. So, like, say for example, if I'm writing that full name function, I can't just write full name and call back the function. I have to write students dot full name to call back that function. So he could have did it that way. Actually, he could have wrote that, and then he could have wrote maths. If he would have did that, then it would actually brought back the same answer he got. But instead, he did it a different way. What he did is he said maths dot full name, right? And he still got pretty much the same answer. So he's still calling back the full name function, but he actually wrote maths dot. And Python is so Python is so good. Isn't that something? I accidentally burped, and I liked his video on accident, right? But I really do like the video, so he deserves it, right? But it's amazing. I burped, and it I'm burping likes out here. But anyways, maths dot full name. He's calling back the full name function, and he said maths dot. He put the maths in front of it, so Python automatically knows, hey, listen, that maths is inside of a class. Python is awesome, right? It's inside of a subclass, so it automatically knew. Ooh.
For you, because we have just created both of these classes and they're kind of mixing together. So what we are going to do is we are going to create a new class. So I've created this new inheritance.py file over here, and I'm going to be writing new code over in this inheritance.py file.
All right, so
we are going to be taking an example of university people. So we are going to be taking an example of the university, and inside that university there are a lot of students, there is staff, there are employees, there are teachers, there is gardeners, for example. So there are a lot of people inside a university. So we are going to be creating an object-oriented class-based system that is going to be using inheritance in our case. So we are going to be creating a new class, and we are going to be creating a group of university people. So I'm just going to write university people, and what are some characteristics of the people that are going to be inside this university. Obviously everybody would have a first name and the last name and an email. Now I'm not adding salary over here because, for example, students don't have a salary but teachers have a salary. That we are going to be adding separately inside a different class. But for right now, every person inside a university definitely has a first name, definitely has a last name, and definitely has an email. So I'm just not going to waste a lot of time. I'm just going to copy all of this stuff from over here, and I'm going to paste it over here.
All right. So all right.
Every person inside.
All right. So you see how he made another class, and he's copy and pasting he is initializing. Okay. The init, that's a special function that's initializing those variables. It's a new class, so he has to do that again. This is not a subclass. University people.
Inside our university has a first name, a last name, and an email. And we're also going to be adding the functionality to actually print out the full name of any person inside our university. So let's add that over here. All right, so this looks pretty good.
All right, so he took that function and he took and copied that function into this class because he pretty much wants to, when you call that function, he automatically wants to add the first name and the last name. Instead of writing this piece of code right here over and over and over again, he put it inside of a function. So all you got to do now is call the function. It's going to add the first name and last name.
Now we are going to be using the characteristic of inheritance. For example, inside a university, there are a lot of students, and each of the students has a first name, the last name, and an email. So I'm going to be using class students, and this students class is going to be inheriting from university people. So I'm just going to write university people over here, and inside this students class, we are for right now, let's just write pass. And also we have a lot of teachers inside a university, so let's also write teachers, university people, and we're also going to write pass over here. All right, so this looks pretty good. Let's actually try.
All right, so pretty much is he's writing two more subclasses to university people, okay? And that pass pretty much allows you to keep going. You don't have to write anything right then and there. It's kind of like a placeholder.
Out and see if it works. So we are just going to add student 1, and let me just copy and paste this stuff from over here, and let me also just copy the teacher one over here. So I'm just going to paste this over here, and let's see if it works by printing it out. So let's print out something like all right, let's print out the students dot let's print out the student 1 full name. So I'm just going to write student 1 dot full name. Actually, we don't require this print statement because we already have the print statement inside our full name function. So now we can just print it out and see if it works.
For understanding.
Right, so
another point of understanding, let me bring it back a little bit before you just did that. Dab for understanding. All right, so pretty much what he just said is, listen, whenever you're dealing with functions, that function is going to pretty much do whatever you put in that function. So inside the function, you put print the first name, last name. So when you call it, you don't have to put it there. And because this function is inside of another class, you have to reference that class. But he referenced he referenced the actual object that is within that class. The object is stu. Well, I'm not gonna say object because the objects are pretty much stu1 and stu2 together because they pretty much different. They're like, Maybe look at my notes. Get the correct verbiage. What should I call these things? He pretty much referenced like let's just say object or whatever, but he referenced stu1 dot full name. So he said, listen, call back this function full name. However, I want the student one, which is going to print the first name, last name, email. All right, so let's keep going.
Have the print statement inside our full name function. So now we can just print it out and see if it works. All right, so our full name is being printed. Let's see of our maths teacher, is the full name being printed or not. So let's click on play. And as you can see, the full name is being printed. So now we have inherited both of these properties inside our students class and inside our teachers class. Now that you understand what inheritance is, let's go a level 1 up. So what if we want to add a different characteristic inside our teachers?
All right, so do we understand what inheritance is, people? We understand how you make another class and you pass the name of the other class through it to inherit all those things, right? And then all he did was did that, and then he just like, okay, let's print out some things. And then he pretty much showed us what is the syntax to print it out. So Python, you can do it correctly, right? The initializing part of this code, he really explained that in the first video. So if you didn't watch my the previous video, this one you should. It's very important.
Class. So right now the teachers only have a first name, the last name, and an email. What if we also want to add salary inside a teacher's class? How do we do that? That is pretty simple. You just need to copy this line of initialization method to over here inside a teacher's class, and then you can just add salary over here, salary, and then inside this what we are going to do is we are going to take the first name, the last name, and email from our university people class. How do we do that when we have already initialized it over here? So for that we use this method known as the super method. So we're just going to write super over here, and we are going to write dot and then initialize, and we are going to write the names of the things that we want from our parent class. So in our case, the teachers, which is inheriting from the university people, is known as a child class, just like you're the son and the daughter and you're inheriting from your parent. So your parent is the parent class and you, your son and daughter, is the child class. So in our case, the teachers is a child class and the university people is a parent class because teachers are inheriting from university people. So that's why we are writing super, that is go to the parent class and inherit the first name and the last name and an email from our parent class. So I'm just going to write first name, the last name, and the email. Now if you don't want the email to be inherited and you just want to code it on your own somehow, you can just remove it if you want, but I want the email too, so I'm just going to write email too over here. And then the salary can be added in a very simple manner, just like we did over here by writing self.salary equals to salary. So all right, so what we're going to do is we're just going to write self.salary equals to salary. All right, so we have added this extra characteristic inside our teachers class, and now over here, as you can see,
all right, I wind that thing back one more time. Let me wind it back so I can explain what's going on. All right, so whoa, this is very important. All right, so I want you to think about this for a second. Think how important this is for us to learn this, because right now we're only working with 26 lines of code. Imagine if you were working on a project that is like 10,000 lines of code that's in all these different files. So you got inheritance file, you got main file, and we got like 20 other different files. So you see how important this is. Like right here is only 3 little instant variables, right? Little variables right here, 1, 2, 3. So this is the parent class, and then we're going to take this child class which is the teachers, and it's inheriting everything from there. That's why we use the super, right? The super dot, and then we kept going with that because what we're trying to do is we're trying to declare a new variable, a new instance variable called salary. So we don't have to copy 1, 2, 3 and initialize everything again. We can just use the super little function down here, dot init, and what that is going to do, that's going to inherit it these three variables, instant variables, so we don't have to declare it again. We don't have to initialize it again. All we're doing is initializing is the new instant variable that we want. So we want, okay, so if we, like, say for example, all right, okay, all right, I got this. Okay, y'all gonna learn today. All right, so if this is another file, and then this right here is like freaking 700 variables. Like if this actually is a real university and like we got like 700, like this is like 3, but this is like 700. You don't want to take and copy and paste 700. It's just going to make it more harder to read for the next programmer. Like, of course we can take, or I can copy and paste 700. It's only going to take me a couple seconds, but think about how hard that is to read when you're scrolling through. It just increases the complexity over time. So in each and everywhere, when we're writing this bit code, we want things to be simpler. So all we want to do is use the super function, and then we're going to inherit those 700, instant variables. All we got to do is just initialize the new variable that we actually want, which is salary, in this function. Cool.
Inside our teacher's class, and now over here, as you can see, it shows us an error which says, hey, you have not given the salary of a teacher. What kind of a idiot are you? Because teacher is not going to work without a salary. So we're just going to add a salary, and we are going to give the teacher a salary of 97,000 US dollars. Pretty rich teacher. So let's
so all that is down here when he actually is putting those three instant variables, inside and setting it equal to a variable. It's calling it teachers. It's like an object basically. They got mad because you actually have to have a value, because this is like, it's like a placeholder salary. Like we're going to pass through something salary. You actually have to have something passing through.
We print out the salary of our teacher, so we can just write salary over here. Salary looks pretty good, and let's print this out and see how it looks. So let's run this inheritance file, and it says mass.salary string object is not callable. All right, because this is not a function, this is an object, so I just did a mistake by calling it. We have to actually print it out. Such an idiot. But that's right over here. Let's print this inheritance.py file again, and now you can see that the salary is being printed. So we have inherited the first name, the last name, and the email from our parent class, that is the university people class, and then we have added another characteristic, that is the salary, inside our teachers class. So we are not inheriting everything, but we are inheriting some things. Now the good thing about this, using this technique, is that let's say, for example, let's say we want to add a new characteristic inside university people. So for example, let's say ID. We want to add an ID of, so every person in the university has an ID, for example, a student roll number or a teacher ID. And then we can just write over here self ID equals to ID equals to ID. And then these four things are automatically added. That is, this ID is automatically inherited inside this teacher's class and inside the student's class. So we don't have to write it again over here. We can just write ID over here. And if you want to inherit it, you can just also write ID over here. And one other, let me just roll it back because I don't want the ID right now. But one also great.
All right, so let me say this. Two things I gotta say. The first thing, what he just did. All right, so basically what he said in the parent class, he wrote a new instant variable, which is ID, and he was saying that if we wanted the child class to inherit an ID, we just write it. But let me I want to say this first. So when he said print maths.salary, it's amazing that Python actually can pick this up. Like, we didn't have the reference like automatically, because maths is not like within, like indented in. It's like it automatically knows, okay, maths.salary. Okay, maths is pretty much in this class. So maths.salary, and it went and printed the actual salary. So I'm having trouble understanding the first part. Let's back it up. So he said an ID, because I thought he said if we put an ID up here, it'll automatically get inherited by the subclass, the child class, which is teachers and students. Then he said if we want to inherit an ID, we write it in there. I'm a little bit confused on that. Let me back
usage
up a
of this
bit.
thing is, let's say you want
Let
to
me back
change
that
the
thing
name.
up.
You have to write it
Explain again,
over
brother.
here. We can just write ID over here.
Explain that one more again.
ID, and then
Back it up a
these.
little more.
So every person in the university has an ID, for example, a student roll number or a teacher ID, and then we can just write over here self
Back it up a
ID
little bit
equals to
more.
ID. But let's say, for example, let's say we want to add a new characteristic inside university. Add another characteristic, that is the first name, the last name, and the email from a parent class, that is the calling it. We have to actually print it out. Such an idiot. But let's write over here. Let's print this inheritance.py file again. And now you can see that the salary is being printed. So we have inherited the first name, the last name, and the email from a parent class, that is the university people class. And then we have added another characteristic, that is the salary, inside our teachers class. So we are not inheriting everything, but we are inheriting some things. Now the good thing about this, using this technique, is that let's say, for example, let's say we want to add a new characteristic inside university people. So for example, let's say ID. We want to add an ID of, so every person in the university has an ID, for example, a student roll number or a teacher ID, and then we can just write over here self ID equals to ID equals to ID. And then these four things are automatically added. That is, this ID is automatically inherited inside this teacher's class and inside the student's class. So we don't have to write it again over here. We can just write ID over here. And if you want to inherit it, you can just also write ID over here. And one other, let me just roll it back because I don't want the ID right now. But one also great usage of this thing is, let's say you want to change the name of a name and you just want to call it last name or something. So you can just call it last name over here. You can just call it last name over here, and you can just call it last name over here, and maybe over here too. And then you won't have to worry about changing it inside the teacher's class because you have just changed it inside the university people class. And now if you have, for example, 100 classes of teachers, students, gardeners, staff people, or all kind of people inside the university, you won't have to change the variable name of last name inside every class. So that is another usage of this inheritance. Now what we can do is that we can take this concept of inheritance a little bit deeper and experiment with something new.
Okay, I'm having a little trouble understanding. Okay. So I'm gonna just take what he said, because he pretty much went off of it pretty extensively. So basically everything that is in here, right? The super function, we use that so we don't have to copy and paste everything. So everything that the first name, last name, and email is automatically inherited by teachers. Okay. So if the inside of the teacher class, the F name, last name, full name, last name, email is already inherited. So I'm just go with that. And if we put another instance variable like salary, I'm guessing when he said we won't inherit, we're not trying to inherit everything. I guess he's saying that salary will not pretty much be affected by the parent class. So I'm just take it and roll with it. And if I'm wrong later down the line, I'll be pretty much corrected. However, we are understanding object-oriented programming, right? We're understanding at the basic level, at the core level, which is very important. The foundations. We're understanding inheritance.
Known as nested inheritance. So for our example, let's assume that there are a lot of teachers in the university, and for every subject there are a couple of teachers. So for example, maths has a couple of teachers, science has a couple of teachers, geography has a couple of teachers, and even history. So what we are going to do is we are going to create another class that's going to inherit from our teachers class, which is indirectly inheriting from our university people class. And that is why we are going to create a nested kind of an inheritance. And if you know about nested loops, you probably know that Nested loop is a loop inside another loop, and similarly inheritance, that is nested inheritance, is an inheritance inside another inheritance. So it's kind of like inheritance inception. But anyway, so what we are going to do is we are going to create a class of let's say maths teachers, and inside this we are going to inherit from this teachers class, and you can just write pass over here. So what this is going to do is that it's not only going to inherit all of the stuff that is inside teachers, it's also going to inherit all of the stuff that is inside university people, and you're going to get all of these 4 properties and any other functions that you have declared inside the teachers class.
Bam. Okay, so I waited till down the line and I pretty much got my confirmation. He just said that the child class inherits everything from the parents class. So when he said we don't want to inherit everything, I don't know what he was talking about. Maybe he's talking about that salary. But anyway, we do understand now that the math class is going to inherit everything from the teachers, which is inherit everything from the university people. I thought that the syntax for that was going to be like so complex and crazy, but it was actually pretty simple. Let's keep going.
So this is kind of the idea of nested inheritance. Now all these classes, that is the teachers, the students, they're also known as child classes, and the class that they inherit from, for in our case this is the university people, so the class that they inherit from are known as parent classes. So these child classes are also known as commonly as subclasses. So how do you know that an instance is actually a part of a class or not? So there is a function inside Python. There are actually 2 functions inside Python that I'm going to be discussing now that are going to be really helpful to you when you are actually learning this stuff on your own and writing your own code. So the first statement or the first function is actually known as the is instance.
Write it down.
As you can see, this is instance takes in 2 properties. The first is the instance name and the second is the class name. So basically we are finding out whether an instance is a part of a class or not. So we can just write instance over here, and then we can write the name of the instance. For in our case, for example, we can just write student1. Student1 is student1 an instance of the class of students? Let's find out, and if we run it, it should print out true. So as you can see, it says true that the student1 instance is actually a part of the students class. But if we print out, let's say teachers is student1 an instance of this teachers class and print this out, you'll be able to see that it's not.
All right, so pretty interesting. Oh man, this thing gets pretty complex. And because it's so complex, Python has different like functions that you can use to check things, right? Which is it return like a boolean, like, you know, true or false thing. You gotta check it if you get confused. So I'm gonna put here on my notes a little function there. All right, so pretty much this function is called instance. So say for example, like if it's like 1,000 million trillion billion infinity and beyond lines of code, and you step in and it's like another programmer has wrote this stuff, and it's like all right, shoot, man, I can't understand what you know, Mike wrote. Does Mike mean, okay, let me run this instance function and let me check if this instance function, all right, let me write instance INSTANCE parentheses, and let me see if this instance, which is STU1, you know, then like the actual class name, which is like students or teachers, let me see, is this a part of this class? And it was going to return like a Boolean statement, true and false. So you can like, now you can use that function to check people's code. All right. Python is awesome. Keep going.
And if instead of teachers or students, we just write university people and print this out, it's also going to print out true, because basically we are inheriting all the properties of university people inside our students class. That's why it's printing out true. Now the second thing is that the second function is subclass or not. So this function is basically used to find out whether it's pretty obvious that a class is a subclass of a parent class or not. So over here, what we can do is we can just write students, and students is a subclass of university people. So it should return true. But if we say that the students class or a student subclass is a subclass of teachers or not, then it should return false. So these are the two functions that I wanted you to know, because when you are writing code on your own and you have some kind of a condition that requires to find out whether a class is a subclass of another class or not, then you'll probably find these two functions pretty useful. So guys, this is pretty much it for this video. In this video, we learned about inheritance, and we couldn't cover polymorphism because we have already exceeded our time. And I don't want to make this video very long, so it's already pretty long. But yeah guys, anyways, this is pretty much it. I'll see you in the next video where we'll be learning about polymorphism.
Understanding in my brain. All right, so look at functions and all that. We learned about those two functions at the end. It's called is instant and is subclass, to find out is this instant a part of the subclass and is this class a part of this class, right? Well, is this a child class to this parent class? And you just plug those two classes, you pass those through as a function. In an instance, you just pass the first one as an instant to the actual class. Like, hey, is this instance a part of this class, right? Is this class a part of this class? So it's very interesting. Instance and subclasses. So I would say again, this guy here, Bill of Python, he's pretty good. Subscribe. I'm subscribed and I got a little bell rung. So yeah, it's pretty good. I understand. So yeah, welcome. Thank you for attending another episode with Learning to Code with Aric on my journey to become a full stack Python developer. Really understanding the concept of object-oriented programming and instance and subclasses and objects and classes is going to really help you. Like when you start to get into like using functions inside of functions, inheriting stuff, and you start scraping and you start putting all these, as the code start getting complex, it'll pretty much help you because you got an excellent understanding on the foundations in coding. And with that, my people, let me hold the mic with both hands because we are done. And thank you. Talk to you guys later.